term other as a reason for a school excluding. Currently a fifth of all exclusions are described as other with no further data held by DFE. Should that be removed, and should we have greater transparency when as many as a fifth of children are being excluded with no given reason other than other?
I think it's extremely unhelpful, and I wouldn't like to ever see a classification. If new reasons can emerge, another might be necessary in the short term, but if it's more than a tiny fraction, and that fraction leading to immediate questions about, well, what are those other reasons in the system? Are they properly thought of as something that exists, or is there something genuinely new here that we need to be addressing? A fifth, I agree, sounds completely extraordinary.
It is from a very long list of acceptable reasons that would feel quite fair, so it seems very disproportionate.
James.
Thank you, Chair. A false opposition. Okay. I spoke to a number of head teachers in Bury ahead of this, and broadly they were, as Lucy's said, pleased with the new framework. So congratulations on holding the sector together in celebration or in welcome for that. A couple of questions that they posed for me. How will you balance out the data that you hold on the school with what you find in the school?
Well, in essence, that's what we do at the moment, and always have had to do. At the moment, for example, the outcomes judgment is particularly strongly data-driven, but we also make judgments about personal development and behaviour and welfare and leadership and management and so on. And to arrive at that overall effectiveness judgment, the inspector weighs up. They do not have a mechanistic formula that says 10 points for this and 7 points for that. They have experience and a lot of training and sort of moderation, so it's a conversation with other more experienced inspectors to shape and form them in doing that weighing up. And that will continue in very much the same way through into this framework. So it's a slight shift in balance in that the outcomes are being looked at in the context of how they're being achieved. Because it is a problem for us at the moment that two schools that are essentially getting the same grades, and one of them is absolutely teaching the right way and giving children that full experience, doesn't get distinguished from the one that's doing it in a reductive way. So we need to make sure that we've got that handle on how results are being achieved. It doesn't mean that we're saying outcomes don't matter, they're out of the window, but we're taking a step or two back so that we can properly understand the context and what's being offered. Are children doing the right subjects, getting that full education?
And so it's a really good phrase in the context of how they're being achieved. How will this be differently represented in the scoring and the reports that the schools receive or that the parents get to read? What's going to be different?
What's going to be different? Sean, do you want to?
So currently there's an outcomes judgment that is a separate grade. So there are 4 key judgments, as we call them. One of them is outcomes, and one is teaching, learning, assessment, and leadership, management, and personal development. But what we're doing is bringing together the outcomes and the teaching, learning, and assessment into the quality of education, so that you can look at what the school is trying to achieve for its children through the curriculum, how the teaching and learning is supporting that intention from the school, and then what the impact is. And the impact will not only be in terms of those qualifications, which, as Amanda said, they are a passport for young people, especially age 16 and 18, onto their next stages. But it's also about things like destinations for those youngsters. In primary, it's specifically about the true standards of reading, not just what they achieve at the end of Key Stage 2 in the reading test. And so bringing those together with how they're being achieved is how it will be different. So there'll be 1 grade there, where currently there are 2, and a very small part of the current framework is about curriculum, which is sort of boxed away in leadership and management. We think that's showing the true substance of education. We want to open that up and make that a core part of this framework.
So how will Ofsted take into account pupils with SEND issues if they can't follow a trajectory that's assumed for pupils without SEND?
As we do at the moment, and that conversation is about all the children in the school. It's not, and perhaps I think this is a helpful framework, because it's really important to remember that children with special needs are still children who need to learn the same things as other children, who have the same reason to have aspirations and want a decent path in life. For most purposes, we should be thinking about all children together, and only moving off into thinking about specific things where it's actually needed. There's a little bit of a tendency almost to think about schools as though there were a mainstream school and an SEND school separately. What this framework is trying to do...
That's because at the moment there is a huge increase in special school provision and an off-rolling and an explosion of off-rolling in mainstream. So that's being exacerbated by the current crisis in our schools. And if a framework is playing its part in emphasising that two-tiered system, then schools are rightly wanting to be recognised for their inclusivity. So what's going to be different in the measure of inclusivity? How will a school feel that Ofsted has cherished their efforts of demonstrating inclusivity? Because the schools I know that are doing the right thing by all children are let down at inspection time by a lack of cherish on Ofsted's part and the judgment afforded them because they've been inclusive, whilst up the road a secondary school is talking a good game whilst off-rolling kids that aren't up to scratch as they see it.
That's exactly why this focus in the quality of education on all children, not all children apart from the SEND who are often as a little box over there, all children, and why this sort of strength around behaviour. A very large proportion of SEND is not children who are sort of physically disabled, it's children with behavioural problems. And how
but
they are
those
managed
behavioural problems, but if we see them as simply behavioural problems, without you talk yourself about working upstream ahead of preemptive. Some of the demonstrable behaviour is because of the lack of support in the classroom, the premise of the teacher assistant to teacher support. So how is a school going to be reflected and rewarded? Or how is that going to be reflected in the report and rewarded for that demonstration of behaviour?
That is in the quality of education, which is the most important piece of this framework. It's the biggest chunk. That inclusivity is stressed all the way through that, precisely to make sure that it's really thought about. Because you're absolutely right, it's hugely important. And if we think about, we can think about special needs of various kinds. There's the piece that some children are just born with, some kinds of disability. There's one piece. There are things that can go wrong in children's lives before they come anywhere near formal education that can create educational problems for them, and where we have a wide range of services that can or should help. We have the things that are around schools themselves about how they approach education and about how they approach that sort of wider helping children along the path of life, getting them ready for adult life. And the second two pieces around sort of what they educate and how they steer children to good self-management, resilience, all those good personal qualities are absolutely things that are core responsibilities of schools and that are threaded all the way through this.
One quote, thank you, Chair, very graceful. Just on destinations, you talked about briefly as part of impact. How would you offer some context to an area that's deprived or with low employment opportunities in terms of recording data and context on destinations, i.e. where our young people end up? Is there any thought on that? Can schools...
Give us a brief answer. We've got some questions.
It would be contextual. The data is out of date at the moment and too slow coming through, but it needs to be better. But there would certainly be a contextual discussion about that.
Thank you.